I want to talk about the narrative that runs in our mind when we embark on the journey of natural medicine. One of the biggest mistakes I see in natural health is that we often carry forward the same worldview as conventional medicine. We simply replace the tools. So instead of pharmaceuticals, we use herbs. Instead of surgery, we use supplements. Instead of prescriptions, we order functional tests and blood tests that are seen differently, right? And instead of one, we order 25. So the kind of substitution takes place, but the underlying story hasn't changed. And the body is still viewed as a machine that is constantly at risk of not working properly. And the immune system needs boosting, and the liver needs detoxing, and the hormones need fixing, and all the things, all the old stories that are running in the conventional medicine realm, they are still applicable by people who are switching to natural medicine. So I want to bring that into light and to challenge that and show how that impacts the outcome, the healing process. So, because the body is still viewed as a machine and constantly at risk, and constantly there is a need to manipulate manipulate the body, right? Because we chase the numbers on the blood tests and try to correct all the measurements. And with the same philosophy and different tools, we're going to get very similar results and disappointment in the natural medicine. So as long as we keep the same philosophy, we will keep produce the same relationship with our health. And that's kind of the point of embarking on the journey with the natural medicine, is to change the narrative, is to change the relationship with yourself, um, instead of being vigilant and constantly monitor yourself. So I want to steer you towards a different perspective. And the perspective is, what if the body is not failing? What if nearly everything that we call a symptom in conventional and even naturopathic medicine right now is actually an adaptation? So it's a perfect response to the circumstances, to lifestyle, to stresses, to foods, emotions, living in alignment with yourself, ultimately. And that discomfort and the inconvenience that comes with it, because there's always that inconvenience that you are unable to go to work, unable to attend an event, to stick to your schedule. What if that has a purpose? So a fever isn't necessarily evidence that the immune system has gone wrong. We know that fatigue isn't always the body giving up, and inflammation isn't automatically the enemy. So weight gain isn't proof your metabolism is broken. And these may all be intelligent responses to the conditions the body is experiencing. The body is continually asking you questions. And one question is this: what is the safest way for me, for the body, to survive the current environment? So we put our bodies into certain circumstances. Yeah, and it's not food, it's relationship, sleep, work, loss that you've experienced, uncertainty at work and life and relationship, purpose, your purpose, the pace of life that you've adopted, the beliefs that you hold about yourself, your nervous system. So the body adapts to all of that. So food is just one tiny little aspect. However, food is the easiest aspect to manipulate and change. So all the ingestible stuff is the easiest stuff to act upon. That's why there is a lot of focus on that. So you can keep everything that's going on in the background, but you can just change that and you will feel temporarily better. So this changes the questions we ask, right? Instead of how do I get rid of the symptoms, we begin asking, what is this adaptation trying to accomplish? What is the purpose of that? So instead of how do I boost my immunity, now in winter, it's a very, very common question. What makes the body feel it needs to defend itself this way, right? So they're profound questions. I'm going to put them like a little playground for you to experiment with. So how do I fix my hormones? Instead of that, we can ask what conditions is my body responding to hormonally? And we talk extensively about perimenopausal, menopausal journey and the change in hormones during that period of life in my metabolic restoration program, which everyone who's watching is invited. So even blood tests, they kind of deserve a second look. I'm not against blood tests. I can read them really, really well and I can extract the information that is a little different to what doctors normally extract from them. And some doctors get more trained in the functional medicine realm, but there is even nuances to the functional medicine readings. And so I'm not against that. They can provide useful information and also they can play a little psychological role in your healing journey depending on your psychological type. Yeah, we are all very, very different. We all have very different values, and sometimes to get that kickstart to healing, to real deep healing, not just taking supplements or drugs, it's we need certain environment, and sometimes they play a positive role if used correctly, all the testing. So, but somewhere along the way, we've started treating lab markers as if they are the patient, right? Do you get that? So we treat the numbers as if they're patients and we want to fix and manipulate and correct them. Yeah. People celebrate because one number moved, right? But it moved because you manipulated, you put an artificial supplement in, and that showed up in the blood tests. You stop the supplement, the body will reverse to what it was doing before because it was adapting to everything that has been going on in your life. Or we panic because another number shifted by a few points and it's bad and it's in the red now. Meanwhile, they haven't asked the bigger question. How do I actually feel? Yeah. Am I sleeping? Can I think clearly? Do I have energy? Can I recover? And again, some of those questions may shift because of that temporary input with supplements, herbs, certain ingestibles, and even when you change your diet. Well, that's a big one. That's the most positive one, I would say. Yeah. But the thing is that health isn't a spreadsheet. It is not. And a perfect pathology report doesn't guarantee vitality. And I've seen it so many times. People come to naturopath as a last resort because they've been to the doctor and doctor looked at the blood test results and said, everything is fine. You're good, but they don't feel good. And they keep looking for answers. But unfortunately, that is still within the same framework of chasing up perfect numbers on paper. Um, so an imperfect report doesn't automatically mean disease either. So numbers describe and they don't explain things. Sometimes they do, but again, you need to know how to interpret them. Not just, oh, this is high, we need to dial it down, or this is low, we need to supplement. Not at all. I also think we need to be careful with the language that we use. I'm very, very big on language because it shapes our belief. It's our inner conversation, and the body is always listening. Yeah. So my liver is sluggish. I've heard so many times that people show up and they just self-hypnotize themselves, right? My hormones are failing. My body can't do XYZ. This organ is doing ABC. Then eventually we begin living as though our body is very unreliable. Yeah, we become suspicious of it. Every sensation becomes something to investigate. Every symptom becomes something to fight and correct and fix. Every change becomes something to fear. This relationship alone creates a huge stress on the body and on our mental health as well. So imagine instead waking up each day assuming your body is trying to help you. Not that it always succeeds in that, yeah, but it never needs support. So it always will do what it needs to do, and the body doesn't need to go and read a medical textbook on how to heal, how to regenerate, how to produce new cells. The body doesn't need to do that. It will do that automatically. There is an immense wisdom to everything that the body is doing, right? Um, it's always attempting to move forward, move towards survival, towards repair, balance with whatever is available right now. So if resources are not available, the journey is going to be tough. So that assumption changes everything. Now, herbs are there to force, not to force the body, but to facilitate, yeah, to support the existing wisdom. Nutrition isn't controlling physiology and moving insulin, leptin. It's about providing resources for restoration. So movement isn't punishment, it's communication, right? And rest isn't laziness, it is biology. It's what's required to live well, right? So this is also why I don't like fear-based health messaging. And every week there is another food to fear, another toxin, another deficiency, another hidden danger, another miracle supplement to cure some of those things. And another reason to believe you're one mistake away from that illness and you need to act and take that supplement and, do that protocol. So fear keeps people searching. So imagine that fear taken out of the picture. Do you need 20 supplements? Right? So that's a very interesting perspective that I want you to open up to, right? And real health begins with trust, right? I'm not talking about ignoring symptoms and just trying to positive think into, good health. We need to take action if there are symptoms. If something is bothering you, we need to unpack and play detectives to see where it's stemming from, right? We're not pretending everything is fine, but we're recognizing that symptoms often have meaning before they have pathology. And the body deserves curiosity before correction, before acting and throwing all hard artillery at the physiology, right? Understanding before intervention. So, for example, I always say um, when people ask me about MRI imaging or CT scans, because there is quite a bit of risk with what the body is going through in terms of electromagnetic influence on the body and radiation. And my question is, what would change? Would your strategy to your health, so if there is certain mobility issues, not caused by an accident, when we need to see where the fracture is, how to set the bones properly, what's happening with the ligaments, and not about that, when it's just a maintenance sort of issue and mobility issue that arose from that. And my question is, would that change your strategy if you know the label, if you know what is happening to the ligament, to the muscle, to what have you? Will that change that? And oftentimes it wouldn't. You would still do physiotherapy, you would still do certain anti-inflammatory herbs, you would still do that homeopathic treatment that we talked about. So my question is, why would you subject yourself to that procedure unnecessarily? when it's not a matter of life or death, when we're working on it. So understanding before intervention, that's my message, and listening before controlling everything. Because once we start playing those number games, the chasing markers on blood test results, you can never win that game, ever. So sometimes intervention is essential, sometimes it's life-saving, but those cases are very, very rare, and it's mostly to do with emergencies, right? And most often, nutrients, movement, breathing, herbs are exactly what's needed. And the question is the mindset from which we intervene, from which we act. So, do we intervene because we believe the body is incompetent, or we act because we recognize the body is doing its best under the circumstances that it's under, and we want to help it. We want to facilitate that process. So, my hope is that we stop creating a natural version of disease focused medicine. Instead, we create a culture that trusts the intelligence and asks better questions. It's it always pays off to ask questions, um, questions that support adaptation rather than fighting it. And because when we change that story in our mind, we tell about the body, we also change the way we care for it. And sometimes that's where healing truly begins.